Hey, how's it going? Why? No, why? Wish stuff would just work. So I updated my mixing software. All my mics were turned off or swapped, so I had to re-update the devices. I forgot to switch over this, and now the chat's not working. Where are you, Nicola? Good to see you. Fortunately, I don't see you there. um, what are we doing here, StreamerBot? Says we're connected. Oh, that's not what I want. I might have turned this on and off again. Oh, I'm at that. I feel like it cycles. There's the. I'll just switch over here. There's a cycle of like everything seems to be going swimmingly and it works nice, and then like everything breaks at the same time, and I just get burnt out in like fixing everything, like not just stream stuff, but even weird like notification issues with my phone where I just don't get notifications until I pick it up and unlock it, which is super frustrating. Uh, just technology in general not cooperating. But why is the chat not working? That is, we'll give it a sec to see if I can resolve it, and then if we're not having any luck, then you know what it is. You have too many, and then when you open the phone, it crashes. Oh, okay, now it showed up. Did it? Oh, no. Now it showed up. Interesting. Must have taken a minute for it to actually connect to start sending stuff through. So do you get that delayed thing too? I've got an Android device. Do you get that thing where it delays the notifications? I've checked like literally every setting I can think of. There's like no optimization, no battery optimization, no app optimization that I can find turned on. I don't know, but especially like Gmail is really weird where just get so many emails and then I swipe them away, then they like come back up and it's it's too much at a time. Yeah, I'm like actively like just I need to turn everything off. There's just so much noise. Unfortunately, no, the ones that I care about, I'm not getting. Anyways, enough of the ranting. It seems to be working now. I don't know. It must have been something with YouTube and streamer.bot connection. Now it's coming through fine. I didn't actually change anything. And speaking of things not working / me having have not had the time. Wow, words. Also, I don't know that I got much sleep last night. I haven't had time to do the last tweaks in the to-do app to where we can like jot stuff down. So I'm just gonna me not having had the time. Me no talk today. Me brain slow. Need time. Anyways, the to-do app. I'll get to it. right. I'll work on making that to-do app thing happen today. And I've seen a couple comments too, like where's the code for X and X and X, or like this thing that you did on stream 6 months ago. Where's the code? And I look at the comment, I go, did I do one of those things where I did the stream didn't have a chance to push the code up. Windows updated my computer and restarted, and then I completely forgot about it. It just goes out of my brain if it's not in front of me. I appreciate the comments. I will get code up eventually. Anyways, so today, rather simple premise. We looked at doing plugins last time. We looked at doing and how they fit together, both sort of like Rust side-ish and JavaScript side-ish. And I think I've got a potential use case in mind, and I know people have been asking about I think now the big ones are probably testing and like update or deployment, ship your app kind of situations. Those both are definitely like hot on the radar. But in terms of the testing, I'm kind of curious if we can use the plugin interface as a way to better enable testing. So we're kind of working into it. We looked at the different, like, what it looks like to implement it in V1 and V2, and then Rust and JavaScript. This app is on V2 beta. Yeah. So I think also what is interesting about the plugin architecture is that you don't necessarily need to the reason to make a plugin doesn't have to be a thing that you want to ship to a registry. It could be just an internal abstraction, which I think conceptually is kind of a neat idea. It's more of the, like, you can use like multiple crates and multiple files within your Rust and the Rust side of things to sort of like split things out. But if you have some like very separate abstraction or code that's very separate from the rest of your app, it might actually just make sense to pull that out as a plugin, because you can also pull out in couple or include in that abstraction both the Rust and the JavaScript pieces, which I think is an interesting architecture and not something that you can use the other patterns to use. You're doing something that's currently a separate binary. You might want to do it in a plugin as a separate Tauri app to the original. Yeah, it's because a plugin is a combination of functionality that is implemented both, or I guess more of an and or in Rust and JavaScript. It could theoretically be mostly a JavaScript thing. I suspect in most of those cases that if it's more JavaScript focused, it's probably going to be likely something that is also works in the browser and Node or what have you, and would be something that you could theoretically ship to npm. But yeah, the Rust and the Rust with a little bit of JavaScript, I think is, it's an API basically with WebSockets. Okay, yeah, it's like that kind of stuff. I feel like that pattern starts to make sense, especially with this better support of better plugin support in V2. Like a Cloudflare worker. Nice. Oh, like a local worker? That's kind of a neat idea. Yeah, that is kind of a neat idea. So like instead of using a service worker, you're using like a Rust worker. That's neat. The Okay, the main app talks to write files. Yeah, that makes sense. I think like that kind of functionality in Rust is useful, where you can use Rust as the thing that communicates with the operating system, and you can use the web view as the thing that like takes user land input and displays. Separate process, less memory, local only. Yeah, it's kind of a neat idea. Hey Chaub, good to see you. Thanks for stopping by as always. So I think in partly in exploring that space, but partly also I think as a way to eventually work your way. So rather than like conceptualizing a plugin, like you said, Nicola, the maybe obvious isn't the best word to use, but all of the like this clearly should be a plugin type code is probably already a plugin at this point. Like we've hit all the high level stuff, and we're starting to get into the like the smaller, more niche pieces that may or may not actually need to be a plugin, or like putting it into a plugin and shipping it to create an npm is not as big of a win. So I think the idea of, as you're writing your app, going, oh, this actually kind of feels like it could be a plugin, pulling it out into a separate plugin locally, working with it there until you feel good about it, and then like pulling it out of that and publishing it separately. I think that's sort of like a neat workflow, I guess, if you will. Because you get that speed of iteration. It's still close to your other code that you can iterate at it and make certain that API feels good, and then by the time you're actually ready to, or it feels like it's going to be something that's ready and in a place where you could ship it and others would find value, like it would. It's seen that real world use case already. Yeah, sandboxing it almost. Yeah. I don't know if I would use the term sandboxing though, because it's kind of a. It feels like you're implying some sort of like security separation, but I think it's. I mean, I guess in some ways. In some ways, yeah. Because you can with when you implement an app, your app has a handful of APIs that basically of your like operating system and your app. There's interaction between these two things, and you've basically like defined those interaction points. So you have a handful of interaction points. Some of those are represented as permissions. Being able to like split a piece out and say this piece is a plugin. It does this specific functionality and it has these specific permissions, I think can be helpful. Because one thing, like if you've ever worked on a JavaScript project and you pull in a dependency, and that dependency also has a bunch of other things that it needs, and now you do that with 10 different dependencies, and now your list of dependencies is 50, and you upgrade one of those. Say you're not the person that originally installed it, how do you know which ones are all tied together? And you get this situation where like it's a big blob of dependencies, and in the same way, like a big blob of permissions. How do you know? Like there's functionally no contract to make sure that things are grouped together or upgraded in tandem, or if these pieces depend on each other, how do you make sure that that's all coupled together when you deal with it and upgrade it? So I think I've we've hit on this point enough that the plugin architecture is useful in many ways, even for local abstraction. I think we kind of want to try it here. Hey, Paul, good to see you. Yes. Streaming pretty much every Tuesday. I've been pretty consistent. Yeah, pretty consistent for a while with Tuesday streams. Random vacationer, the kid petri dish getting me sick. So I think what we do is we try to do a plugin in here, and we're gonna just get very little functionality. And the reason I want to do a plugin in this one is because this app is specifically built around the use of multiple windows. And our testing story right now doesn't directly address that issue. It's more of a it seems to work fine for, or if you can get it set up, there's I think some of the pieces aren't quite working now at this point, but if you can get it set up and working, it only works with a single window. But I'm wondering if we can explore this plugin architecture to set it up in a way where we could get it working for multiple windows. And and thanks for stopping by, Hussam. Speaking of Android and iOS, the testing setup I don't think is actually going to hit those at all, but I think we could potentially do that with some sort of like testing plugin. So that's kind of what we're going to explore today. I don't know how far we're going to get. The goal is to get some code that is injected or otherwise shows up or is accessible in multiple web views. I think my expectation is that most of the pieces that we're going to want to try to test are going to be based off of interactions or triggers that originate from the web view. So if we can put code into the web view that we can hook into with our tests in some way, that should be enough where a test could basically drive the Tauri app and do the things it needs to do to eventually test whatever code you're attempting to test. So yes, let's go over to it. You might want to just do I did it again. I do it every time. Switch to Windows mode. There we go. I use the same. I think I say this every week now at this point. I use the same keyboard for both Windows and Mac development. I dig it. I actually put all the keycaps on stream. It's a keycron, but it's got a little switch. I don't know if you'll be able to see it. And it switches the keys back and forth between Mac and Windows. I'll forget to switch it off of Mac because that's what I tend to use during the day. I'll be pressing hotkeys, and it's doing all the hotkeys as if it were it's like on the Mac keyboard. Anyways, all right, so let's make sure we're all up to date here. Let's give this a good pull and check. And I think we can see if we can upgrade it real quick. Yeah, keyboard. I dig it. I've actually considered getting like an ErgoDox or whatever. I don't have a strong use case. I've got a few friends that like went that split keyboard route to help for ergonomics. Like they were having wrist pain and having that split keyboard and the configurability of it, that you can set it up in a way where your wrists are not going to haze you. But it's a big learning curve. I don't know. This is fine. I like this keyboard. I swapped out both the switches and the keycaps though. I've got keycaps that you barely need to press them for it to activate, which is nice. Let's make those notifications go away because reasons. The simpler the better. I mean, like honestly, if it works for you, all the better. Simpler is, I guess what I'm trying to say is, simpler is sort of relative. There's a bar that you need to cross to allow it to be serviceable to actually meet better. So when you say simpler, sure, but simple could look different for different people depending on like where that bar is for them. You know. So I mean this works for me. I switched from like a full keyboard down to this is like a 65% or something. I don't remember. But it gets the job done. Is as simple as I can get it to meet that bar where it's good enough. And it hasn't been worth any more brain cycles to try to improve the situation because it works well enough. Okay, so just reviewing a little bit what we have. There is a main window, which we define here. We actually do have the global Tauri turned on right now, and that is at the app level. So that'll end up being turned on for every window. I'm pretty certain. I don't think that's separate. And we can add multiple windows here. We define, this is like the main window, the root one. We don't actually define the ID there, but that's effectively the main window. And I think that's about it. I think everything else we're doing right now in the app code. Preact too. I'm looking at it. I'm like, oh, React. No, we're actually using Preact in this one. Here, so this is where we have our code that actually creates the new windows. So you can either define it sort of as like static windows. You're always expecting these few windows to be opened up or otherwise available might be the best way to describe it. But you can dynamically create new windows. I'm pretty sure it's still true. You need a main window. So the best you can do is hide that window if you want to just have a thing that spins up new windows. So right now we've got a public and a source Tauri. I think we end up writing basically a plugin and put it in a separate folder. So what we're gonna, our goal or the thing we want to try to make happen is that we have a main window and we have this web view window, of which it's dynamic. So we can have multiple of these new web view windows. But all of those new ones use this HTML file. We could theoretically in like the HTML files put this code. And we do have a little bit of code in there already that is using things on the global. So I think what we want to do is try to make a plugin that uses the global and injects an iffy into each so as to because if we put like listeners in, that would be enough where we could do functions or something and basically get those like injected code to listen for or otherwise let us know that it's heard events. So I think that's what we're going to end up doing here. One thing that I did want to look at, we have some plugin docs. I think maybe we start there, and as we work through it, that might help clue us into the like where we need to fill in the gaps. Now, the question is, where is it? Tired brain does not remember. Front end configuration, nope. Prereqs, IPC. Debug. Pipelines, learn. Where did it go? We found it last time. Is it under, we didn't get rid of it, did we? Plugin. Plugin development security. Write in plugin permissions. Plugin development. How did I miss that? Did we click right over that? I think we might have. The example Tauri code is helpful. You get it included when you enter a new plugin code. Oh yeah, okay. And that, since I've looked at plugins last, this is new for me. I haven't actually used this. So we're gonna get to use, at least for me, the first time. And we get a bunch of this. Some of this, at least in this case, multi-window is less valuable for Android. So in reality, this project only should be supporting desktop at the moment. But we get a bunch of this extra stuff in here too. So this is what we'll end up starting with. And I think we're going to end up just running through this whole thing and seeing how far we can get with it. And we might need to like break off and do other bits. Paul says, do you only work on Tauri stuff on your Tuesday streams? No. But it has been a lot of Tauri stuff lately. So I'm involved with the Tauri project. I'm just posted this the other day. If you're interested in getting involved, we're always happy to support new people on the project. And especially with the beta and all the new APIs, I've just had a lot of topics that we could explore. I think we're starting to get sort of to the end of all the things I personally wanted to look at and other people have sort of asked about. And now we're starting to get to like stable RC phase of Tauri. So the Tauri stuff may continue in a big way still. But if you do there's a couple commands down there. I don't know if the hide works. I said this last time and I didn't actually follow up and look. But hide, 3D, and drop are all commands that we did on stream. So if you look at the past streams, I need to add a command for that to do thing. That's going to be the next one I do. Is today a good one? I thought maybe !project. But basically I have a command that shows the to-do list for the stream today. But we've done I've done Blender on stream. I learned Blender and made some models, exported them as GLTF, and pulled them into React 3 fiber scene. So we've done a bunch of WebGL on stream as well. What else have we done? A bunch of other random JavaScript projects. There was one other topic that we did a whole bunch of. I have a few playlists too, so I try to group them, or at least in some reasonable way. We've done a little bit of like small electronic stuff, and it's more in the vein of like high level small electronics. So how can I use the it's mostly been like JavaScript-ish and piping it over to and using it with little electronics, so like communication layer type stuff. But I do want to get into Rust embedded. That's been on the to-do list for a little bit, but when you kickstart a project and it takes like a year for you to get any anything out of it, there's a few pending streams due to that sort of thing. Yeah, today and project are very used on Twitch. Yeah, yep. For the most part, that's like a check command that just lets you like it returns a string. What I want to do is set it up to so like if you do exclamation mark drop, the counter goes up down there. We get 3D models, and that's all going through a program called streamer.bot. And we've done a bunch of this on stream too. That's all physics, and they randomly spawn in different spots. So I think it already is non-deterministic, or slightly, but it's even more so just because I've got like a math.random in there. And if I click one of these, which I actually want to come back to eventually, that also works and interacts with that same physics. So if I happen to do one of those at the same time you do an exclamation mark drop, physics, and that works through Rapier, which has a Rust implementation, and then they have I think it's WASM into JavaScript. But that's all wired up with streamer.bot, so I can listen for events. Long story short, this supports WebSockets. The scene you see, including this, is all WebSockets. It is front ends written so as to communicate over WebSockets with this. So all of these like elements can interact with anything that's coming basically through chat. So what I can do is I can make a little Tauri app communicate. Speaking of WebSockets, Nicola, it was Nicola, right? That was yes. WebSockets can communicate in my to-do app with the stream stuff. So you can do exclamation mark today or exclamation mark project and literally pop up my app that has the to-do list. So I think that's going to be more fun because it's live. And then I've also got some other like internal things that I want to do. I know every so often I get a comment like, how does somebody watch this 3-hour stream without any timestamps or anything like that? Having a to-do list that makes those for me, splits things up into chapters and whatnot, I think would be very nice. Because I can never seem to remember to press the button to make a mark. Like I just did. So how did we get here? Yes, lots of Tauri stuff lately, Paul. I'm always open to do other things if there's other areas that are reasonably related. I'm open to experimenting. What I've been doing on stream is a lot of experimentation. The reading through docs, learning things, and experimenting, sort of like pushing the bounds of tech in a way where you can sort of come along for the ride and learn with me. is what I find fun. When I find the time, space, and energy, I'll probably start to wrap up some of these pieces into a little bit more like relative to streams, bite size. But like do like I'll probably end up doing like a 10-minute video or something like this on the system tray app stuff that we've done. So if you're not interested in that gargantuan effort that could be to watch 20 hours worth of stream content of me learning system tray app stuff and doing it on stream, that's the alternative. And yeah, that to-do list thing, I have talked with a couple other streamers too, and that sort of has come out of that a little bit. I mean, I'll probably set it up in a way that's generic enough that somebody else could use it, but it's definitely scratching my own itch first, and we'll see where it goes. If others are intent on using it, I'm open hoping to support that, especially if I can help with maintaining it, because clearly things are I've got enough stuff to maintain. So some help and making sure it's not broken, it would be helpful. All right, so plugins. I think we basically just run this and see what we get. I mean, obviously we're gonna get this, but the pieces that I suspect I'm going to be most interested in are this. Transpiled assets. So like this injecting bit I think is where I'm most interested in, because I think that's where a lot of the plugin stuff starts to really become interesting. Because I mean, you can publish an npm package and you can publish crate, and each of those can be used separately. But using the Tauri APIs, especially if it's going to be something that's sort of like automatic, when you just add a single line, code this plugin, and it just does this thing, I think you're going to be kind of reliant on this kind of stuff. So that's where we're going to dig into directly, I think. So I don't have actually any. Oh, let's see if we can do a couple quick upgrades, because we might need or otherwise want it. And fingers crossed you don't actually break anything in the process. There is upgrade. Do we have we've got the migrate command. I think it's still cargo upgrade in the folder. We didn't add an actual like built-in method, did we? I think it's just this migrate one. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna go here and search C Tauri. We're gonna do a cargo upgrade. Upgrade or update? Also could never remember that. Cargo upgrade. It seems like that actually might have done what I expected it to, but is it update? What's upgrade? I can never remember. I feel like all the like homebrew, chocolatey, scoop, all of those, like they just all of these are just like interchangeable. So bouncing between them and doing them seldom enough, I could never remember which is which. Computer's definitely chugging. I can hear the fan spinning up. So we've defined most of our dependencies in a way that it's going to be using the latest beta. So by doing this, we should get the newest stuff here, because we're not actually like pinned it to anything very specific other than this one. Tauri plugin OS. Are we still using that? I think that might not actually be used. And we had pulled it in and Platform. Okay. I think we had specifically pulled it in because the window decorations are different between different operating systems. Most of it that we've done though has been on Windows. But yeah, the nav thing, we just wanted to go away, and I think that's why we originally pulled it in, but we're not actually using it. Tauri apps / plugin workspace. OS. So there is, yeah, it still does exist. Okay, let's go ahead and do this then. And we'll do a cargo update just to be certain. And now let's go ahead and look at our package JSON. This one's a little bit more. So we're using npm. Historically, I haven't trusted, or the commands to do updates haven't worked well. 22.1. We can leave React on that. What we really care about is just these, I think. Vite is really old though. We're gonna try it. So here, let's start with this. npm outdated. The way we're declaring it here, which is kind of atypical from what I normally do, it would actually let us do the upgrades, I think, because we're defining it as we want basically the latest beta. Latest, okay, ignore that. This is what we currently have. So we do want the latest pieces of those. So if we do npm up, is it update? Npm update. What is that going to give us? So now if we look at outdated, we got, so Vite is the same, which is I'm fine with for this case. We do have the latest Tauri ones, and we got some of the new Preact, which should be fine. I think that's going to be safe. So now we can do an npm run Tauri dev. Fingers crossed it works. We'll go ahead and just stage these. And what we'll then follow up with, I could probably, you know what? Let's commit that. So that's doing its thing. Git checkout. Let's make a new branch. We'll just call it I guess part of it too is that yeah, okay. Test plugin. I'd rather keep it separate, but it's fine. Okay, we've got a thing, but it's nothing is actually like showing up because we get some we're getting some errors, it looks like. Yeah. So this API has changed slightly, which is fine. We can go ahead and update that. And web view, app window, I don't know if TypeScript's actually going to help us out with this. So the error we're getting is Tauri apps API does not provide an export named WebView window. It's kind of interesting that we're, oh, I bet you the imports are slightly different now. I think those got changed around since the initial, was this on a beta, initial beta? If we look at, is it WebView window maybe? Yeah, so those got changed around a little bit, I think. There is a WebView window. And we've got window and we've got WebView. We want to make I have to remind myself which one's which now. APIs to create, because this has changed a little bit over the past handful of months. Okay, so window is going to be create web views, manipulate the current web view window. So this would create both the window and the web view. And then I think window is literally just the window. So this would be like the Chrome or Winit. WebView would be the thing rendered inside of it, and WebView window would be the thing that's handling both. In our case, what we want is a WebView. Oh wait, WebView. One is one creating the other. Okay, new WebView window. New WebView window. Okay. This is. I feel like this example's out of date. So that I think is where we want to be getting it from. Get current. I believe that still is what we want. So now we should be able to do a refresh. There we go. All right. There we go. Got that fixed. So now we can do any of this. There we go. And close, close, close. Create WebView window bad request. So this could very well be, if we look at the payload. Ah. Why is it trying to create it? Oh, that's probably the other bit. So there was a, so there's a create and then we've got to remove. The way it did work, and it might still work, is what you need to do is set up the class so as to call close. So now if we've got a WebView window, we want to call close on it. So you can get monitors current, that's all monitor. Yeah, so like this is going to be the label for the window, and it's creating a new window. But what we need to do is close that window, and we needed a handle to it. And what was a little bit awkward, and I think we've changed this. To get the handle to the window, you'd pass an ID. That ended up being the same interface as creating. So if your code didn't expect or otherwise handle that, it would actually, when you go to close it, if it had somehow closed already outside of what your app state thinks, you'd actually end up creating the window and then immediately closing it. But there was no other way to like really check other than to do that. So label window. So on window, we get a close. Closes the web view. So as long as we have a window class, we should be able to call close. And there should be an get name, get version. Nope. Event math. Thought there was a way we could get. So app window, new window. Get a current one. Web view instance to communicate with the web view. This also has a close. That closes the web view. So part of this too is so we have a window, right? And then we have a web view rendered within that window. They used to be tightly coupled, partly out of necessity, but like the ecosystem just wasn't in a place where it made sense to or was easy to separate those two, like make an abstraction with those are two separate pieces. And part of V2 is actually the ecosystem has kind of gotten to the point where we can start to look at making that abstraction. The reason that's valuable, we've done this on a few past streams, that now we can have a window separate from a web view, and we could actually render multiple web views in a single window. But it doesn't have to only be web views. We could also render other things. Like one of the pieces that we've explored on stream is what does it look like to render a Bevy app and a web view in the same window. So part of those things being coupled together was the event loop bits, but there's now more generic handlers that the ecosystem is kind of adopting on the Rust side of things, where that becomes more possible now. And in doing that abstraction, we get a little bit of like some pieces are still sort of overlapping, some are sort of not. That's probably something that we could look to make a little bit more clear as we're going through. You haven't followed the full journey yet, but would be able to work with the tray app. Are you asking about the multi-window thing, Paul? So get current is going to give us a window, the current window. We have one window controlling other windows though, so that's not going to work. Available monitors, current monitor. I thought we had a way where we can get a specific, that might just be on the Rust side of things. I might just be thinking of Rust. Interfaces, platform specific window. You also get a handle on the window so you can just listen for events. Yes, you might need to say more. I feel like I'm missing some context there, Hussam. Yeah, sorry, would this work with the tray app, like an update or a custom alert? Oh, like popping up a new window? Yeah, that could. Conceptually, this I was gonna say this came before the system tray app stuff, but we've been playing around with system tray apps on stream for a while. The system tray app template that we made on stream is an amalgamation of multiple Tauri APIs that sort of like make the building experience quicker. We're expecting these like handful of APIs to always be used or have some value in a system tray app. So bundling them all together in a thing that you can kind of just copy is useful. Conceptually, this is an app that can create multiple windows. You could have this living like long lived in the system tray. This isn't something that you need to have or open and then close. So we could actually roll this in to be built on top of what we're doing with the system tray app stuff. But specifically, I think what you're saying for can we use it to make updates or custom alerts? In theory, yes. But there's also the native operating system notification functionality. And the system tray app uses and sets that up. So I think the pattern that we were kind of imagining there is that either you're going to be handling alerts within the app, so like a toast notification, and you could do that if the app is focused, but when it's not focused, then fall back to system tray notifications or operating system notifications, because then that gives the user control over how or when to interact with those, rather than you just popping up a window and getting in the way when the operating system already handles that functionality. So in theory, yes. The things that we were using in the system tray app were when you click down here and you click on an icon, that experience is very much tied to the operating system. So one of the things we were experimenting with was, if I go down there, click that, can I just open up my app in like mini mode instead? And would that be a better experience than just like an exit and a show or whatever would be in the default option? There's a few apps like I know 1Password has like a mini mode and then a full app mode. So like conceptually, it's kind of like that's one way to approach it. Basically, have like a mini mode and then a full app mode. So like multi-window can be useful in that sense, where you open up the app in mini mode and then you might want to like click a thing and open up another thing in a separate window. And there's a handful of it feels like a lot of industry specific apps that are very much like all in on multiple windows, because if you were a power user and you're building with like a modeling software, the ability to use 2, 3, 4 monitors as you're working can actually make quite a difference. So you can put like, your main modeling space on your big monitor, and then on the side you can have like the metadata always showing. So those are probably going to be the biggest use cases, I think, for multi-window. Those type of interactions that don't fit well onto a single screen. So when you create a window, you can get a handle, which you can also use to listen emit events. Yeah, I think so what we were doing when we created it, we're just getting the ID. We're just saving the ID. We weren't saving the handle in the state. I think theoretically, I don't know. It feels like there would be gremlins if we try to save that handle as part of the state. I suppose in theory we could, and maybe that's just the way to do it. I suppose if we can't get a better interface than tweaking this, then we might do that. And I guess in some ways too, I don't want to spend too much time on it. It works for the moment. Like, just ship it. Because this isn't a multi-window stream, or at least it wasn't intended to be. So if we need to come back to it, it's fine. Yeah, so there's this handle. I mean, maybe it makes sense to just hold on to that handle. Like in reality, we should be able to recreate that handle though, just based off the ID. That should be the only thing we need. But I don't know that we really have the function built in to do that. Because it's going to be just like creating a new one anytime we call that. So maybe you're right. Maybe the way to do it is, I thought we had a way we could just use an ID as a way to reference or otherwise recreate the handler. Get current, get all. And it might just not be documented either. Or it's only on the Rust side of things. Or both. Set position. And in which case, like it might make sense to actually, this is kind of actually cool. I saw somebody do a demo of another digression here. Crab Nebula created a crate which helps doing drags. So dragging in and out of like your window. Using this API, I'm presuming somebody set up an integration where using that crate, you can drag a component out of your app and actually open up a new window. So coming back to your question, Paul, about use cases of multiple windows, if you have an app, you can actually set it up to where like I'm going to take this component and drag it out of my main window, and then it becomes a whole separate window. That kind of interaction, I think, is part of why apps can be valuable over something like just rendering it within a web browser. The ability to have that flexibility is really neat. So, okay, I think this is going to be a comeback to it. I suspect, unless I'm remembering correctly, and we just haven't documented it, I think it would make sense to go with the option that Usam was presuming, where we just save the handle in our state instead. Yeah. VS Code is one of those that it's, as I understand, Electron hasn't really supported multiple windows. And VS Code is built on, I think it's Electron, but it's like modified now. Don't quote me on that, but I feel like multiple windows has been something that's been requested with VS Code for quite some time. So supporting an Tauri is pretty neat. Can you set up your VS Code? Honestly, VS Code is one of those things where it's going to work if the thing you download is going to work. I wouldn't bother customizing it until you feel the need for that customization. Like if I've got a lot. I probably don't even need them all. I could give you the list of extensions. It's not really going to benefit you though. It's one of those things where, like here, people have seen this before and gone and asked like, how do you get the thing that tells you the size? Or, where's this like get stuff coming from? I think those are the cases where you see somebody else using VS Code and there's a piece of it that looks really valuable and is useful to you, then go seek it out. Otherwise, I would say just download VS Code and use it as is and kind of go from there. You're rewriting Tauri, or you're rewriting VS Code on top of Tauri. It's not NeoVim. It VS Code seems to work pretty well out of the box. So customize it, and like everything, customize it as you see fit. NeoVim is it seems to be one of those things that attracts people that like to customize stuff. But if that's going to be the thing that allows you to focus and ship faster, cool. Code editor land. Yeah. I mean, like everything, there's at some point you're going to cross over the is this valuable anymore, or is it just causing a distraction? And sometimes distraction is not a bad thing. We get distracted all the time. I call them digressions because I think it's valuable to talk about and discuss pieces that we're specifically interested in. But sometimes your brain just needs a little bit of a distraction, and that's okay. But also, if you're not ever shipping anything and you keep getting distracted by your editor, maybe that's something to reevaluate. All right, so we're just gonna set this aside. Like it's fine. What we can always improve the situation later. Let us go ahead and go to the plugins overview and run this thing. And we're gonna call it, come on. And we want you. And we're gonna do these sort of side by side. So we'll go like this. We're gonna say npm run Tauri plugin new. We'll just call it test harness right now. We'll see where it goes from there. But I just want to, for the most part, focus on how these pieces fit together. And oof. Interesting. Oh, come on. So we get, I mean, a get ignore seems reasonable. Please hold. My music has stopped and I need some beats. Okay. GitHub workflows though. I guess. I didn't realize it did GitHub workflows. Examples. So this is kind of what who said it? Somebody was saying that there was a bunch of examples, stuff that comes with it. Some. Yeah. I didn't realize it did all of that. Does it actually? No, it doesn't note that. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at all these pieces. We get so we don't have a separate plugin folder. It's just like top level thing, and it's a little bit, I guess. Okay, so this kind of makes sense because it's set up with the expectation that you're publishing it. And if we look at like guest.js, this is the code that then ends up getting transpiled. So I'm presuming that, yeah, what we have here is a thing that takes this and puts it into a this.js. So that's the thing that ends up getting injected in to whatever you're using. So what I'm actually going to do, we're going to chop this up a little bit here. Let's do plugin, and we're going to move. Actually, it should probably be plugins, but and good. It doesn't look like it actually installed anything. So I shouldn't have done that. I should have done that on the command line. I always forget. Like, it's so convenient to drag and drop, but Windows I/O around that is just not speedy by any means. Well, okay. I guess we're just gonna wait for a minute while it's doing that. So for the most part, this example actually is not doing anything. It is set up to show you how to integrate it. Yeah. I kind of figured. So like this is the bit that we need. I don't really care about greed. We do want to add in the plugin, but I don't actually need any of this stuff. Like I can literally copy this and put it in our main app here. Lib run there. Oh, is there? Oh, plugin. Let's see what that looks like. Oh, not run script. Init new help. A new plugin project. New. So if we say new, verbose directory path Android mobile iOS version. Oh, there it is. Initialize a Tauri plugin without the TypeScript API. I want the API. I don't need the example though, and the .github. I think I'm probably okay with everything else. Okay. I gotta remind myself new shell stuff. Move flags, source, and destination. So source is going to be Tauri plugin, and we're going to move it to plugins. There we go. Is it going to complain about this? We'll call it plugins. Yeah. There we go. If you don't need JS in the docs, yeah, and it's here. It was right up at the top. It took me a minute to see it, but I do actually want the TypeScript. I just don't need the examples and stuff. But just to make sure, we are, yeah. So this is, it's set up as a dependency. Build. I don't think there's anything in here. For the most part, you need it in your cargo.toml. Then it becomes something that you can basically just import and use directly. We're not using any internal bits. We're basically just grabbing it and calling it, so we don't have to do a use or anything of that nature. And then on the front end, okay, this is all just default stuff. Yep. So we're going to go here and say, plugins, examples, Tauri configuration. They put it under dependencies. Okay. Okay. So now from the perspective of this folder, we need to go up one, and then we need to go to plugins, and think we need to go to the cargo.toml. So Tauri plugin test harness. That seems to be working. So we're going to end up removing these two folders. And I'm gonna, as always, regret doing it through VS Code. Yeah, just add the plugin as path and cargo. Yep. I couldn't remember if it was like the trailing syntax. I feel like I set this up once and then I forget about it. It's like the same thing as that like npm update or cargo update. And I can do it once every 3 months, and it's like, I know how to do it. I've done it before. I've done it multiple times before, but remembering the exact syntax always escapes me. I do really appreciate that. Like, this is the way that Cargo has set that up. I feel like they nailed it, because you can do any like Git dependencies or anything, so it sort of precludes any need to actually publish the crate on some nightly schedule or whatever if it's a highly used thing. Some still do, but you can just hit that SHA directly, which is great. All right, so we shouldn't need any of this stuff now, and we're not going to need the examples. Basically, we're going to have this. So there's here, we have a function that's a ping, and it fires off an invoke. I think what we do is we switch this to listen for events. So what we'll do is when a window receives an event, then we're going to do some work. So I think all we really need to know is that this thing is getting injected and we can see it in every web view window. So maybe we start there. Let's make sure that we can like emit an event and yes, go away. Let's try to emit an event and see that we can actually get the message coming through. So we have some life cycle events. Here, let's just make sure there's nothing else worthwhile in here. Plugin configuration. I think that is probably all set up for us already. We have life cycle events. So if you're writing, the more you end up having to write in Rust, the more you'll end up using these APIs, the life cycle events. In the same way that you're going to have life cycles events for the like your main Tauri app, you're also going to have similar ones for plugins. Web view ready, on navigation, and on drop. So this is when setting up your API, you can expose it to user land effectively, and this talks about it a little bit. Yep, we did actually use this API in our system tray template. We pulled in and set up a global shortcut both in JavaScript and in Rust side of things. In commands, invoke, upload. And can define a scope. So, and this might be another little bit too, coming back around to why when you might make this type of abstraction, even if it's just a local plugin. I didn't realize you could scope stuff like this. So you could potentially, it feels like a good place or a good reason to start to split pieces out if you want to or will find value in handling scopes and permissions separately. Because you can be much more focused on like, this plugin should only be able to use this specific set of APIs. And if you do that with multiple local plugins, eventually it's all going to come back together into the same like list of plugins, but it's you'll be able to more closely manage it is maybe the best way to say it. And I think that's probably the thing that's most interesting to me. Okay. Yeah, we can define our own permissions. So this will be the permissions. I've seen them used or otherwise implemented more on the front end. But I guess with this API, I haven't actually seen any uses of it. But this would potentially be a way to help lock down the Rust side of things a little bit too. Wanting to work with Tauri has got you into learning Rust with Rust links this week. Yeah. Honestly, like the reason I know any Rust is because of Tauri. And I think what's interesting about Tauri is you have the ability to like, especially with V2, you can do a lot of work in your web view. And if you're unfamiliar and otherwise intimidated by lower level operating system type code, you can get a lot done still in the web view, but then you can kind of work your way into learning Rust and focusing on the bits where you're actually going to find value in your app and implementing those in Rust. Like if they're very performance sensitive or if they're very operating system specific, it feels a bit in the vein of like React Native, where you can kind of like, when needed, drop into the low level stuff. And that like ability to like incrementally get into it, I think is really, really neat. And I've done a bunch of Rust things. I don't know that I've ever actually finished it, but I feel like every time I came back to it, they had added a whole ton of it. So I just kind of like progressively kept working my way up to the same point. I need to make or want to make more time to learn Rust better, but only so much time in a day. So I do a lot of learning on stream. They're auto-generated when you create a new command. Oh, the scope stuff, right? Is that what you're talking about? Yeah. The more I look at it, the more I like conceptually that idea of handling scopes and permissions. Plugins being an interface to handle those better. The way we approach and explain permissions could potentially use some work, especially if you're coming into this first time V2 and you're trying to work mostly in the web view. Being exposed to or otherwise having to deal with permissions seems to be a little bit more of a bottleneck than it was in V1, but you literally learned Kotlin because of Tauri. Nice. See, I like that. The ability to provide an on-ramp into additional learning really, it feels good to me. It's one of these frameworks that it feels like we can be entirely inclusive, because in theory, Rust can be a foundation that works with lots of things. It feels very much like an enabler, especially with the way the compiler is able to sort of like help you along. You're not fighting it. It's more of a guide. But permissions, yeah, okay. I'm assuming permissions is in reference to the command. Okay, let's get this event stuff working, and let's see if we can get it actually injected in. Actually, here, first things first. This might be we have a function that is literally just ping. If this is being injected and immediately invoked, I might expect that we can see this in every web view window. So right now we do have globals turned on. So if we do an npm run Tauri dev, let's see if we're going to get any errors. We didn't actually build. We're going to need to do that. And we might potentially get an error. I don't know the... Is it only inject these ifs into the web view if like dis.js or dis-js exists? So here's our permissions. Okay. Permission table. Okay. Yeah, permissions are definitely one of those things I like. It's valuable. But it's a bit of a rabbit hole. A bit of a rabbit hole. And technically we don't need these, but we're going to leave them in there for the moment. Commands, ping. There's a whole bunch of work to set up this ping. That might be the biggest downside is I guess in some ways though you would have to do this anyways. You're going to be copying it out of your code. I don't know how to say your name. I apologize. But you ask, can you explain the v2 update plugin with Crab Nebula? I believe what you're asking is how does the Crab Nebula cloud interact with or otherwise work with the updater in v2? Is that your question? Well, we'll come back to it if I'm hitting on the right. Yep. This function is invoking a Rust command written in the plugin. Yep. So if we look at lib builder, much like the Tauri builder, and we have the invoke handler and setup. The setup here is kind of boilerplatey, but it's setting up the mobile and the desktop separately. So it's a bunch of boilerplate in here to set up to work in all these like different situations, which is more boilerplatey than if we look at our builder here, because this is primarily focused on just desktop, and this was generated or otherwise created before a whole bunch of this stuff existed. Okay, so I mean, all I really want to do is make sure that this shows up in all of the web view windows, because in some ways, I think when we explore more and play around with testing, that's going to be the bit that we really care about, is how can we, because there's going to be there's sort of like the two pieces that we want to like consider when we're testing. When we test our app, we have kind of a back end and front end ish. The front end can use Tauri APIs. In theory, we could also run that front end in a browser. So you could use something like Playwright to test. But then you're having to mock all of the Tauri APIs, which can work. And that there might be value in doing that, especially if you're looking specifically at supporting both web views or within a Tauri app and a web app. Then there's value in doing that, because what you're testing is you're testing the web app. You're testing to make sure that you're working with it and otherwise like toggling off those specific Tauri APIs. If we're looking just at a Tauri app though, ideally you kind of want to run it in the context of a Tauri app, and that's where things start to get a little bit more complex, and where the WebDriver IO integration in the Tauri driver crate is set up to help with that, but it only works on a single web view or a single window. It's and I don't. Well, we'll pull it in and try it and stream it at some point here in the near future. But it's not going to end up allowing you to really test that integration of the front end to the back end bits. And that glue code, I think, is where testing would be valuable. But we need to set it up in a way that isn't going to be painful or otherwise require a lot of effort. You can also listen for emit events for event. Yep. And I think that's what we're going to end up sort of going down is if we can make a plugin that is used for testing that has a piece or a thing injected into the DOM, it's going to be aware of the DOM or otherwise be able to act on the DOM and also listen or emit events. So we're probably not going to focus too much on testing the Rust side of things because I would imagine that you're going to be writing why is oh, streamer.bot is done. That's probably why it wasn't working before. I saw the thing was disconnected. Anyways, distracting myself here. We need a thing in the DOM so as to be aware of and act on the DOM. And then you need that communication layer. And I think the events is where that will end up happening. You need the backend Rust type code. You can maybe do more of a unit test style. Like testing via unit tests or lower level tests might be a cheaper and more efficient way to do it for specific Rust APIs. But that like interaction between the front end web view and your Rust code, I think that's the thing that I would really be interested in like really hammering on more. Specifically for situations where we have, if I can click on the button, we have a multi-window app, because that interaction I think is quite difficult to actually test at the moment. So what I want to make sure is if I am injecting this thing in here, I want to make sure that this thing is showing up and I can see it in every case. It's way better than the command in your opinion. Command is effectively helpers over that same API. So it's just a different pattern. So depending on how or what you're implementing, it may be useful to use that command abstraction. But at some point, you're effectively firing off what amounts to like an HTTP request or receiving one back for the listen. So that emit listen API ends up running off of that invoke as well. So like if we look at our where did I put it? Public here. So that's what we're doing here. We're on the web view listening, and then we're reacting to it. So from the other window, we change a color and then we emit an event. And that ends up going through that invoke API, hits the Rust side of things, and then ends up coming back through this other window. So, I mean, we'll use whichever one makes sense for your use case. I think the command is convenient because it provides like that additional encapsulation. So you get at a function that you can effectively just call, and it has payload expectations is probably part of the value that it's providing. Okay, so let's try building this. So it looks like we just run build. I don't really want yarn as a possible default in here, but okay, so we'll go here and we'll go to plugins and do an npm run. I might need to do an install first. Let's do an npm I. Okay. Plugins, and let's do an npm run build. So that should give us a roll up. We are getting an error. Cannot find module roll up. Okay. Can I find module roll up plugin TypeScript? Because again, one of these things that I set up once and then just forget about it for years. I guess we do plugins. Plugins. I think that's what we want. So we did need an install. And there we go. Plugins, that npm run build. There we go. That will give us the disk.js, and this should be the IFE that is, I'm presuming, going to be executed the moment we, it's not. Okay, so this is the dist.cast. So we need an IFE. And that's probably, it's probably the part of the thing that isn't super well documented. So if we look at like one of these plugins, I know the store plugin has a class. So it has a guest.js and an index.js. We've got a class that sort of abstracts over that invoke API to allow one to use this without having to know the underlying expectations of the payload other than through this interface. So much in the same way that this command kind of provides an abstraction and helpers. Instead of using a command, you can use a class or a piece that like encapsulates it more than just a command. So like a command feels very much in the vein of like a single piece. I don't mind commands for like, I feel like commands are probably something more you'd use directly in your app and for specific situations. But I suspect when you're building a plugin, it feels like events are a little bit more of a natural fit. Okay, let's look at the package JSON. It's creating a dist. And we also have an API IFE. Event unlistened, suppressed error, resized. Okay, here's the store set. Plugin clear. So this seems to be the full plugin as an IFE. How are they building this? What's the rollup look like? Rollup configuration. Wait. Shared. Shared. Rollup config. Plugin name stuff. ESM, CJS, and here. Okay, so there's an IFE right there. So this is the bit that is implementing the build for the IFE. So that would be the part that we want to check. To see if we also have that. So we don't. So what this will, when you run plugin new, the Tauri plugin new command, you are getting a default plugin with some build steps. So you get the .github workflows, and you get an example to test it in. So the thing that you'd end up publishing would be you basically run publish on this whole thing, which is going to generate pieces and only publish the actual dist. This is going to give you an npm package and a crate, which the user could then install both to get your plugin. But with the dist.js, you're relying on the user to actually import it and pull it into their code. So they have to have a bundler. So the other piece that isn't actually included in this plugin is the IFE, which is this part. In the plugins workspace, we have a shared thing that implements it. So if we copy over, if we copy this over, we should be able to basically use this piece. So we've got plugins, and then, oh, it's a wholly separate thing. Okay, so this piece is basically this. It's an array. We've got, this is like the first group, output group. And create config. Can we, I don't remember if, so it's importing it from store role config. So it's calling create config. So it ends up returning it ends up returning an array. So I think we can switch this to an array. Let's see if this works first. Make this an array and see if it complains at us. We'll go from there. Yeah, the JS part is somehow useless because the code is so simple to write yourself. I presume you're talking about command versus emitting events still. I mean, I think we can make both feel very similar or have a very similar value. Command was probably the first abstraction, which is why it feels like it's sort of overshadowed by using the events. But I think especially when you're adding a plugin, we're probably going to be using more of the event based, because you have less control over actually wiring up those commands. Okay, let's go ahead and grab, I guess, this whole bit right here, eh? And additional configs. We don't have any additional configs, so it seemed to build. So if we do this, we should have an open, it's a file, JS, plugin JS name. Package dot, okay. So we can say, we're gonna need to replace a little bit of this package dot name, I guess. If var name, what's the if var name? Ah, okay. So we'll have Tauri plugin that dot name to uppercase. Do we have any other bits? Warning, warning. Sure, let's try this. So what this will end up giving us, input is not to, oh. Ah. Yep, okay. What this will end up giving us is an iffy that we can use to inject into the global space. Cursor is not defined. We might end up needing some of these, but I'm going to take them off for right now. Actually, we're going to need node resolve. Yeah. I don't know that we're going to need cursor though. Might just grab these so we can make the progress that we need or otherwise want. Package. Let's pull these in as some dev dependencies. So we need this one. And we need this one. Nope, we need this one. All right. So this goes like that. TypeScript. Okay. And install. The JS part inside the plugin. So the value of the JS part or the TypeScript and importing the TypeScript would be you can define the specific type, like the TypeScript type of that payload. So, and having like the convenience functions to actually do that. So it's not an uncommon pattern when you're doing a front end to have some sort of hook or client set up to where you can use the client rather than having to know all the specific APIs. So rather than you needing to be aware of or otherwise understand which invoke command to call, it can all be set up in the client. And because the actual invoke call is a string, and if that doesn't match something that's expected on the back end, then you start getting errors. So rather than expecting somebody to type in a string every time correctly, having a client set up where they can get some code completion from their code editor can be helpful. So if it's just you working on it, calling invoke directly would be fine. And that's probably the first way or first step in implementing it. The store plugin was not something that, all these plugins started from somewhere. So being a separate piece that he actually, or that ended up evolving into and implementing the JavaScript side of things, most of that started in Rust first. So, and that's why in V2 you see a lot more, like the plugin interface is used a lot more in V2, and all of these plugins tend to have a more robust JavaScript side of it versus what we see in V1. And part of that is because the foundation started in Rust. We put it all in Rust. You could still use it all through Invoke if you wanted. But having those convenience functions in JavaScript and that Invoke setup made using it more of these APIs directly from the web view so much more convenient. Okay, so is this gonna work now? Let's see if we can get this to work. And we might end up just getting to the point where we get this thing injected and we see an iffy in here. Given name. Is not illegal JS. Okay, yep. And we can do a replace with underscores. Okay, run you again. Now what? Package name, uppercase. Tauri plugin test harness API. Test harness API. Global. Forgot the G. And so that gave us underscores. And then I also don't really need that in there, I guess. Because it's already called Tauri plugin. Hey, we should have our if you know. And then we will also, I guess we actually, no, we can add it in the get ignore. Actually, I kind of feel like that should be in our get ignore in our plugins as well, but you're talking about the JS code inside the plugin. You can write it yourself. Yes, yep. Yeah, you can certainly write the JS code inside the plugin yourself. It does all just end up using invoke. At this point, I think pretty much all of the plugins just use invoke directly. All right, we made the iffy. I don't know if there's anything we need specifically to wire it up. So that's the bit that is not quite clear to me, and I haven't seen any documentation that specifically says, but I think if you pull in the plugin and it's got an API iffy, you might just inject it. We will find out though. And if it's injecting it in every window, I think I would expect to see the console.log in every window. Okay, so that's opening. Failed to load the resource. Okay, favicon. Sure, whatever, it's fine. So I'm not seeing it there. We are doing a plugin, Tauri plugin test harness init, and we have an invoke, builder new, test harness, command desktop mobile model. We might need to look at the code. It is definitely not clear to me how the iffy gets pulled in. Oh, you know what? I know. The API iffy is generated and then it gets pulled in, and this is probably why it's actually included. Here. We need this. And I bet you if we try to open up the repo and this doesn't exist, it's going to throw an error, which is why it's probably there and committed. So now if we do a refresh and inspect and a console, so nothing. Let's look at the window. See if it's being injected this way. Make that a little bit bigger. So there are Tauri APIs injected into the window, and they show up under Tauri internals. There is, so here you see the invoke, and we got a couple other internal pieces here. But if you turn on that global, if you flip that global flag, there should be one that isn't marked as internal. Where is it? Here. So we have Tauri plugin, or we have underscore Tauri, and it has all of the like high level APIs. OS is also there. We get Tauri plugin operating system, which is another plugin that we've pulled in. I don't see ours though, so we're missing something. Okay. We do global API script path. That should be fine. Guest.js does not have anything special. Build.rs. This just generates. Do we have anything in the actual like lib? What you did is you just wrote Rust, then in your app you wrote custom functions and vocalist. Yep. Mm-hmm. And I mean that's effectively what the command API is doing too. It's just an entirely different. It's a lower level abstraction, I guess. So like part of the command API was it provided an easy way for one to like pull a piece out into a separate function or into a separate file, because originally felt like everybody was just dumping it into like a main RS and it was just a huge file that had everything. But it was convenient to use a command because then that piece was very separate and it was just like handled by, you could do whatever async you needed to, and that's probably the bigger thing, honestly, is the if I recall, at some point in V1 earlier days, the async story wasn't great, so the command API provided an easy or convenient way to handle things async and like tie into that whole async runtime. But now with the event emitter and everything, the async story better, I think that matters. That like the need to use the command matters less than it has, which is why it probably feels fine to just use the event API directly. Like effectively, it almost feels like we're working towards. I don't think it'll be deprecated. I don't think there's really a reason to replace or remove the command API, but it feels like we're working towards a place where the need for the command API is much less than it used to be. Okay, I'm not actually seeing anything that runtime handler. So what injects the iffy? I don't actually know what is I guess first of all, let's check our iffy and make sure it's actually showing up. It's something that appears to be. Okay, Tauri plugin test harness. So there's the console log. And we get our function with the invoke and the ping value. Yeah. Feels fine. So if it should be showing up in here, I would expect, if we're path mocks. I don't see any other. So there must be something that we're missing that is assisting with that injection. We do have the with global Torian, and it is working with the operating system one. So like the OS one is got an AFE. There's a build RS. It has this. We're not doing anything different there, are we? Let's double check that. Oh. Build RS. Come on. Tauri plugin, builder new. API iffy.js. This feels fine. I mean, we can it should be invoking that directly, I think. It's an iffy, so it should be executed the moment it loads. So I would expect to see that log. Yeah, I mean, it might be taking, it might be logging it. You know, like the web view's not, or the thing that is like listening for console.logs isn't ready yet by the time this actually is loaded and runs. Would that be? No, but we're not seeing it in this list. So like something is wrong because we're still not seeing it here. So Tauri plugin test harness API. So what I'm actually curious what's in this. Got schemas. We might need to do schema. So we got this global API script path. We're probably going to see that added in a whole bunch of places. Anything that has the FE for these globals. And this is actually worth bringing up too. The on Android, like what you need in Android is going to be different than what you need on the desktop. So the ability to do something like this is useful because now what we can do is we get multiple things that we can use as a target. It doesn't have to be the OS. So we could do when we're running in debug mode and not in a release, that is when we inject our test harness. So if we only want, if we're setting up a test harness and we want to inject this into the global space, we can very easily use Rust as a way to, based on what it's built with and those build figs, included or exclude the global injection. So we've got a whole bunch of those. There's also separate files for mobile and desktop. Yeah, that's true. We have the ability to customize the pieces quite separately too. So on any of the platforms we can do like different configuration files even. So in this one, as a specific example, we've got a tauri.macos.conf.json because the expectations for Windows are slightly different there versus what we have on Windows here. So we are getting that. So that's definitely working. We're missing something though that is handling the piece or the thing that actually like triggers you to inject it. So when we're using a plugin, we need to add it to plugin, and it has an init. So if we look at here in our init.js, not expecting to see that. Oh. So guest.js has this. And if we look at our build, commands, and our roller configuration is from the shared. What's that shared rollup look like? Again, it is defining the file and the name. So it's creating this file. So where is this init.js coming in? Do all of them have an init.js? I just never noticed it. No. Schemas, auto-generated, commands. Build. I'm missing something. Is anybody else seeing anything? So if we do give it a refresh and inspect, I'm not getting anything. The command in the build RS are auto-generated. The only thing you need to do is allow it and write the code for it. You haven't tried, yeah. And that, like I've seen a bunch of documentation about wiring up and doing the commands and everything like that. And that's why I specifically wanted to try this injecting piece of it, because I don't think it's well documented. And I think it's both useful and something that I wanted to understand. So I would expect to see this. You just consumed Rust with JS the normal way. Yeah, that's kind of what I was also like. That's also how I've been using things. So we get our API iffy, and we've got to build our ass. When I use it, I do the plugin, and we're calling it init, which does this. So what's the init for, like, if we look at, we know the operating system one works because it's being injected. It's still a little bit weird that we've got this init.js. I mean, I guess it's internal stuff. So this isn't a init. Init.js. Init.js, JavaScript new, render default. JS init script. So this, I think, is the bit that is doing that init.js. Maybe look into how they inject anything into the web view. Yeah. I don't know where that is offhand, is part of the issue. I think this is for operating system specifically, injecting this. So if we look at like the store plugin, and we look at lib, so all of these, when you pull in a plugin, you call the init. So if we go down and look at, here's build, API register, setup, I suppose I should double check the docs and see that we actually call a init on this. Ample format. Okay, yeah, let's look at the docs real quick. When you pull this in and use it, it is different. We're doing default and build. Lib. So we gotta look at build. It is using builder, stores, freeze, build. So this, we're setting up the commands, handlers, registering plugins. This would be iOS and Android. Manage stores. I don't see anything that's actually like loading this JavaScript. Is there anything else that I'm trying to think of another one offhand that we've looked at that is actually injected in there. Here, serialize init. So this is just defining the specific property. So there should be also this, if you look at the window, there should be a Tauri OS plugin internals. Comment. There's a Tauri internals plugins. This is curious, I feel like. Pattern brownfield. Tauri OS plugin internals. So here's a Tauri. It could very well be how we're naming it. That feels odd though. We might just end up looking at the docs here, at the create docs. I think you just do an invoke plugin store command with that because they aren't exposing. I was pretty certain though that it did a. If you look at the docs, you use it, and then here. I guess maybe they don't specifically say. All right, let's actually look at that. That's a good way to narrow it down. If we've got a plugin, here's how to use it. We don't have an API, do we? No. Let's actually look at I know the Tauri apps. I know that we have in our API. So this is all TypeScript. You can also either import it or you can use it through this injected piece. So if we would look at the rollup config, I'm presuming we've got an IFE that's being created. Okay, so it actually puts it into the bundle.global.js. I know a good way we can look. Operating system uses it. Operating system has a rollup config, which is doing create config shared. They might actually all just create an IFE. So if we look at store, yeah, it seems like they might all just be creating an IFE. So my expectation is that with global on, something is actually loading that IFE. Part of it is this. So when we pull in and use our plugin, builder new, This is in the build.rs. We don't have it in here at all, do we? Iffy. I'm gonna give this a search real quick and then yeah, like that. I would expect that. I expected that to be enough. So this isn't a init. So this is only invoking it. JS init script. JS init script. This one references just a relative path. So it seems like they all are doing it this way. And they're all in the build.rs. Okay, we're gonna go look at the global API script path. We're gonna go to crates. I think we look at Tauri directly. And we look at, wow, they've updated this. Where's the versions? 2 beta, sure. And docs. And search for that. We don't need the dot in there probably. Global API script path. Because on v2 there's a Tauri plugin, I think it is. Beta 18. Search for this without the period. This. Do we have any more docs here? Sets the path to the script that is injected into the web view when with global Tauri configuration is set to true. This is usually an iffy that injects the plugin API JavaScript bindings to window __ Tauri. So if we go ahead and look at our iffy, we have an if this is in the window, then do this. We are defining this as Tauri plugin test harness API. Define property. I wonder if the injection is happening, but we're seeing it come in as a, like the name is incorrect. Let's just double check to make sure there's no random thing that's just injected as Tauri something. XWTs. I'm not seeing anything. So if we do window dot is Tauri plugin Tauri internals __ Tauri. Let's double check that. That's the only thing I can really think of. So the name. Okay, so this is the root one. If we look at the plugin's configuration is set on the builder and is parsed at runtime. Do not need the npm package. Use no API CLI. All right. Generated crate will be this, and the JavaScript npm package will be that. So that feels fine. And if we look at the shared and roll up configuration, so format is fine. If he is the format of this, we check if Tauri exists and inject the API object. I think that's still fine. Let us double check that these last bits are correct. It feels like the piece that's potentially missing here. So input should be the same format name. So if var name will be underscore underscore. So it's replacing this with Tauri. So we're going to have Tauri plugin test harness API underscore underscore. So this feels fine there. And then in the footer, it's doing this. So we've got a plugin JS name. Is this the one? So that should also be uppercase. So we get, all right, let's grab these. Oop. This is probably why. So it's replacing at Tauri apps slash plugin with nothing. We don't have that, so I think we can remove that. And then it's doing it's uppercasing just the first letter, I think. Then in this one, we're uppercasing everything. And here it is replacing all the dashes. So now, if we go back down here, we should have ify name, banner is the same. This should be footer, should be changed. Okay, let us try this. Gonna cancel, go to plugins. Yes. npm run npm run build. That should create an ify. Hopefully we don't have any errors, nothing. And give that another shot. If this is not going to work for us, we might, this might be where we have to call it a day. We are getting, it is finding it because we're getting a compilation. So the Rust side of it is showing up. Hey, look at that. That was it. So our it is very specific on the format. So based off of the format that's how we're determining it. So like this piece here. Oh my, Tauri plugin value. Okay. Okay. I mean, sure, fine. It works. That was the piece that we wanted to make sure that it is at least working. Bam. So now we have global turned on. We have the with global Tauri true. We set up an iffy. An iffy is an immediately invoked function invocation. I think I got that right. Basically, it's a function, or like immediately when the file loads, it fires off that function, and then that ends up being attached. That ends up attaching it to the window object under the Tauri __ namespace, which then allows you to use it with vanilla JavaScript. So you can either use it with vanilla JavaScript, or some of the APIs actually just use those directly. So rather than you having to import and pull it in and bundle to get that API, you can inject it this way, and it's just available on the window object. Trade-offs in either way. But specifically for this use case, I think where you want to do a thing that's only going to be a dev time thing. So plug in, inject something into the web view. I think this is an interesting use case, because we can use this as a way to like bootstrap context for, like if you're in testing mode or something like that. So depending on the context, operating system, the build type, you can choose to inject this plugin, and this plugin can then do work setting up events or setting up listeners, in which case we can like inject and potentially mutate the DOM, potentially through some sort of like test harness or something like that. So it took a little bit, but we got it. It is a little bit, like this is sort of, you have to do this, and it's sort of not documented that I've seen. So I want to document that a little bit better. But for the most part, like we can just copy this, and we got most of this just through a generation command, which is nice. And then we just needed to add this iffy bit to it. So I think this works pretty well. So the question then is, if we're able to inject a thing in, we might need to make sure that the user is toggling on in debug mode the global, because that might not be something that everybody always does. But if that's the case, like we could potentially have a test harness injected into each window, and each window is going to be each window is aware of its ID. So this is running in the context of Tauri, of that browser. It has access to the window. So in theory, we don't actually need to do this either. So we could do something like if window and this is going to be like __ Tauri. We want to do something like, I guess I don't need to. So if we do say window dot __ Tauri, well, not that one, not prefresh, Tauri dot window, no, web view dot get current. Nope, close. Label main. Dot label. Well, let me do that. Yeah. So what we could do is say, if we have this, yeah, we're fine. Just ignore it for right now. So const window label equals window Tauri webview.get current.label. I'm going to move this up just so we get that logged out immediately. Sure, we'll do that right here. So now when this, we're going to have to manually rebuild first. cd plugins, this npm run build. So this is created or updated that IFI, which has this window dot underscore underscore Tauri, which should give us the current web view label. So now if we run it again, it will do the compilation, build, open it up. Now we should see the label for each window. So every time we create a new window, we'll actually see that that label that we're using when we generate it. I'm not sure why it takes a half second to load. It seems like it's running slower than it normally does, but we get this. So if window underscore underscore Tauri, I would expect that to work. Let's go ahead and just do this and see what happens. We'll give this a shot, and regardless of the outcome, I think this is probably what we're gonna call it. Does anybody have any more questions? Yeah, and like honestly, I don't know that I would expect many people to be able to do this without docs, which is part of the reason that I find it valuable to go through. I know some of this, and I know pieces, and I know history, and that's enough for me to figure a lot of this out. And that doesn't, and that's not context that everybody has. So until it's actually documented and written down, without somehow getting that context to everybody, you just aren't aware. Okay, so we see this in every WebView window. Is it not being updated? It might actually be a permission error. I don't see an actual permission error though. Window underscore underscore Tauri. Like this should work if I paste it in here. Yes. So like here, see we got our ping. Bad request, and this would be because we don't have the permissions, I'm sure. Yep. See, no permissions. So that's our permissions helping us out. I'm not sure that there might be some permission error that's happening that we might just not be seeing. But I would expect something like this to work. We might need to actually like bundle it in there. Come on, stop. Kitty's looking at my green screen here. We're getting the log, so this is definitely coming through, but we're just like, this is just throwing an error effectively or something. Like it's just not executing. I think if we put it like in a function or something like that, we would have it. But I'm guessing we either need to bundle this or we either need to bundle it or it's just, it hasn't loaded yet. That would be my guess. So I suppose if we refresh, inspect, yeah, okay. Interesting. There's something going on, and I'm guessing it's either like a race condition or it's a permission, you know, that sort of thing. But we can figure it out. Long story short, once we inject something in here, we'll have access, or we can set up access to these APIs, in which case we'll know the context of like which window we're working in. So that would be something that, like if we're setting up a test harness, if we've got 4 windows, that test now effectively has access to modify the DOM in 4 different windows. So it's almost like having 4 browser tabs open in some ways, which is definitely going to be something to think about, because when you're running your tests, so if you have something like Playwright, the page object that you get is for like a single browser. And you can do, they've got advanced APIs where you can access and you can use like multiple sessions, or you can pull back sessions and whatnot. But it is definitely a little bit more advanced, and you start having to think about it. So Kitty's saying hi. Can you say hi? Don't be biting my cords. I know you. Anyways, I would qualify this as a success. Would have liked to make a little bit more progress, but hi, yes. Okay, let me press the button. I think next week I'm just about in the final stages of scheduling something for next week. I think we're gonna dig into some documentation next week. Yeah, sweet. I'm glad you got some out of it. Some. I think we're gonna try to do sort of a co-stream / collab / try to get a bunch of people to help tackle documentation all at the same time, shared motivation sort of thing. Because we're getting to the point where the main blocker is documentation for V2. So I want to make sure that we can do our part to push things forward, and all the things we learn on stream, take that and put it in a place where everybody else can benefit too. So I'll probably schedule that, or put that up on the schedule here real soon, rather than the like 12 hours I tend to do lately. But it's fine. So next week, Tuesday, we're planning on docs. Have a great rest of your week, and I will see you next time.